In this example, we have the rational function f of x, which is 4x squared plus 16x, all over x squared minus 4. And we want to identify some important properties of this function, such as the y-intercept, the domain, and x-intercept. And we may have more than one x-intercept. So let's take a look at these properties one by one. So starting with part A, the y-intercept. To find the y-intercept, we set x equals 0 and evaluate f of 0. This is what we do no matter what type of function we have. So it's no different for rational functions. And so in this case, evaluating f at 0 gives us 0 in the numerator, since we would get 4x squared plus 16x is 0 plus 0, and in the denominator we get 0 minus 4. So this would give us 0. When I take 0 and divide by minus 4, we get 0. So this means we have one y-intercept. When x is 0, we just saw that y is 0. So we have a y-intercept at the origin. To find the domain of a function, the domain is the set of all inputs. So what we can do is identify values of x where the function is undefined. And so with fractions, we need to be careful since we can't divide by 0. So in this case, f of x is undefined when we divide by 0. And when are we going to divide by 0? That's going to be when x squared minus 4 is equal to 0. And this occurs when x squared, solving that, we get when x squared is equal to 4, which tells us when x is equal to plus or minus 2. So I need to account for both the positive and negative value of x when we square it, which gives us 4. So we need to eliminate these values. So therefore, at any other value of x, we're okay. So the domain is just going to be all values of x that are not equal to these two values where the denominator is 0. So in interval notation, we can write this as all values of x that go from minus infinity to minus 2, and then excluding minus 2, and then from minus 2 to 2, excluding 2, and then from 2 up to infinity. So that is everything but plus or minus 2. And for part C, the x-intercepts, what we do here is we set f of x equals to 0 and solve for x. So we have the function 4x squared plus 16x over x squared minus 4 equals 0. So we got a fraction. And when is the fraction equal to 0? It's when the numerator is 0 and the denominator is not 0. So let's figure out when the numerator equals 0. So we need to figure out when 4x squared plus 16x is equal to 0. And we can factor out 4x from each of these terms. And for each of these factors, we see we get a 0 when x is equal to 0 from the first factor, and when x is equal to minus 4 from the second factor. So this means we have the numerator is 0 when x is 0 and x is equal to minus 4. And just making sure that these values are in the domain, because if they were to make the denominator equal to 0, then we wouldn't even have these values in our domain. So x equals 0, that falls in the domain, x is equal to minus 4, that also falls in the domain. So at these values, the top of the fraction is 0, the bottom of the fraction is not 0, so they make the function 0. So this means we have two x-intercepts, one at 0, 0, and one at minus 4, 0. And so notice that the origin, 0, 0, is a place where the graph crosses the x and the y-axis at the same time. So the origin is both a y-intercept and an x-intercept.